This AMA has been scheduled to accommodate as many listeners as possible. This session will be streamed on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. A recording will be made available after this AMA session. If you'd like to ask a question, please do use the chat function on whichever platform you are watching this AMA. This is Marvion's first AMA, and we are very excited to share what our business has been doing, who we are, and where we are headed. So let's get down to it. So who is Marvion? So Marvion is a Metaverse blockchain technology company, unlocking, enhancing, and preserving the value of media and entertainment intellectual property through blockchain and related technologies to create hybrid NFTs. The company's vision is to offer the ultimate artist and fan engagement, leveraging technology in both digital metaverse and physical experience realms. Marvion will be adopting their hybrid NFT format across all minted NFTs. The hybrid NFTs will undergo full Know Your Client KYC and verification processes prior to Marvion acquiring the intellectual property. This is to ensure that not only authentic and high quality NFTs are available on the platform. So this evening, we've got two speakers lined up, one of which you're very familiar with, Julian So, and also joining him is Malcolm Wright. So Julian So is the Vice Chairman of Marvion after graduating from law school at the National University of Singapore. Julian succeeded to obtain legal qualifications in Singapore, Hong Kong, and the United Kingdom. He practiced finance law in then the largest firm in Singapore, Allen & Geldhill, and subsequently joined an international law firm in Hong Kong, Simons & Simons, specializing in scrutinization, derivatives, and structured finance. Apart from the legal private practice, Julian has also more than 15 years of experience in the finance industry in all three Asian financial centers of Hong Kong, Singapore, and Tokyo. During this time, he has held senior positions at UBS AG, Royal Bank of Scotland, Morgan Stanley, and then he was head of Asia's fixed income and Mizuho Securities. And then we have Malcolm Wright. He is the Chief Compliance Officer of Marvion. Malcolm is a noted global leader on the virtual asset regulation and compliance. He has previously worked as a C-level executive in both fintech and virtual asset firms, where he has led functions across products, technology, operations, and compliance. Malcolm is also the Deputy Chair of the Advisory Council and co-lead the AML Working Group at Global Digital Finance, which is a digital virtual asset industry body that is supporting regulators and policy makers to develop appropriate supportive legislation, as well as supporting the industry in its goal to understanding and complying with regulations. Malcolm is also the chair of the Practitioners Advisory Board at the International Compliance Association and Associate Fellow at the Royal United Service Institution Centre for Financial Crime and Security Audits in the UK. Nice to meet you both, Julian and Malcolm. Welcome.
Thanks, Martin. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hello, Malcolm. Hi there. Yeah. So let's commence with the AMA. So we just did a short introduction there for those of you who are just joining us, and we did start on time, so we are sorry if you missed that, but the recording will be available after the session. So let's get straight into it.
Yeah, Martin, perhaps I could just say a few words before we jump to any questions.
Of course you can. Yeah.
Thank you. That was a very good introduction, Martin. Thank you very much. Look, I want to begin by thanking everyone that's attending this AMA session. Well, first of all, if you're actually helping with this AMA session, I really thank you for being a very valuable member of our group. It's now 11 p.m. in the evening in Asia. The fact that you guys are up and actually making this possible is a very clear sign of the dedication and the commitment you've got for our group. So thank you very much. For the audience that's here to really listen to what we've got to say and to get some of the questions clarified today, again, I thank you for being here because, obviously you're a very valuable member of our community who actually cares about our company enough to actually attend a session like this to seek clarification. And we are here obviously to try and clarify as many doubts as you have. Now, the reason why I've actually attended this AMA session in my capacity either as a vice chair of Marvion or as the group CEO of the entire group of listed companies and private companies that we have. Number one is because I want to be able to demonstrate or to show the entire ecosystem that Marvion is in. And that we're not just one single company trying to do one thing, but it's really an entire ecosystem. And the second reason is obviously for compliance reasons, right? So, I mean, we've got our Chief Compliance Officer on the call today. Obviously, we're very, very careful in terms of what we say and in terms of being in compliance with all kinds of regulatory requirements. And two things are, very clear today that are restrictions I have to adhere to, right? One is obviously we shouldn't be making any forward-looking statements on behalf of the listed company, which I won't, because everything I say today will be on behalf of me as the group CEO, as vice chair. They are mostly my opinions and my advice. So these are not necessarily forward-looking statements for the listed company. And the second thing is obviously we do not want to be making any or providing any information that might be price sensitive.
So yes, I think Julian was really just talking there about the necessity when you have a listed company that you can't really make predictions or talk too much about the company where it may affect the price. So what's known as price sensitivity. So we have to be very, very careful in terms of the information we're sharing, but of course we want to share as much as possible because we really want to sort of educate and inform what's really happening at Marvion, what we've done so far, and how we see the general landscape emerging as well in the industry in which Marvion works. I see we have Julian back now.
Yeah, thanks, Malcolm, for stepping in. Look, I suspect that for some reason my connection is going to be pretty bad, even though I'm actually in the office. And I apologize to the audience for that. So just bear with me as I try to get in and out as and when I get dropped out. But as Malcolm mentioned, I think we've got to be very careful about giving any kind of price sensitive information. So I hope the audience would just be tolerant, bear with us. In some cases, we may not be able to give an answer in a direct manner. Just bear with us as we try and navigate around those restrictions. But rest assured that the reason why I came in my capacity as the group CEO is obviously to be in a position to give meaningful answers so that we can clarify doubts for our audience and our community members once and for all. With that, perhaps I could just pass it back on to Martin with the questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Julian, and thanks for stepping in there, Malcolm, when Julian dropped out. So I think without further ado, we will begin the AMA session for Marvion. So we'll start with our first question of Julian. What can we expect from Marvion in 2022?
Okay, so again, look, obviously I can't be making any forward-looking statements on behalf of Marvion, so I'm not, okay? What I'm going to tell the audience is what we have, or rather what I have advised the senior management team of Marvion to do, specifically for the CEO and his team members to execute for the year 2022. Now, we have actually, well, the advice that I've given is that we should, from a strategic perspective, look at Marvion's growth and its business in three different parts. The first one, which would actually be our core business for 2022, is to build our virtual universe, right? We're going to build Marvion Universe because I think that is the single most important part of any media and entertainment with respect to crypto, blockchain, and NFTs. So that's going to be rolled out, or hopefully, if the senior management team decides to take my advice, will actually be rolled out fairly shortly. The second bucket, which is also just as important, is actually for Marvion to actually fulfill its original vision, which was to become an intellectual property powerhouse for the media and entertainment industry. So I think if you look at a recent PR or press release that we released for Marvion, you would have noticed that we are already, or we have already begun the process of acquiring intellectual property licenses. These could be adaptation rights. These could be different types of licenses for intellectual property, which will be minted into hybrid NFTs and placed onto our Meta Studio for them to be made available for people in the media and the entertainment industry to come in and acquire, so that they can then proceed to try and produce remakes of existing or previous movies or previous comics or other types of media and entertainment productions. And the third bucket for Marvion is essentially this. We have actually already polished our hybrid NFTs. Unlike a lot of NFTs out there in the market today, our NFTs are actually tools rather than end products. They are meant to be digital ownership titles. So actually legally binding documents that prove ownership in intellectual property rights and licenses. And I think that's where we're different. And by creating hybrid NFTs in the manner that we have stubbornly adhered to, we believe that we will be taking the media and entertainment industry by storm. We will be disrupting the industry, and we'll be actually making these rights and licenses easily tradable and easily acquired and easily accessible for new producers. So that's what we're trying to do as far as our third bucket of business strategy for 2022. I hope that answers the question, Martin. Let me know if there are any follow-on questions. Thank you.
No, of course. Thank you, Julian, for that. And yeah, if there'll be any follow-up questions, I'll be sure to direct them your way. So can you comment about the remake license deal that was recently announced and how it adds value to Marvion and its community?
Right. So as I mentioned a bit earlier, the second bucket of business and revenues that we're trying to push for in 2022 is for Marvion to build a huge portfolio of intellectual property rights and licenses with producers, with publishers. So it could be licenses from books, comics, previous movies. And what we want to do is to be able to create a platform, a centralized global platform where anyone from anywhere in the world wishing to actually do a remake, for example, of a particular drama could come onto our platform to actually acquire the license to do so. For example, recently, that Korea, came up with a real hit, which was the Squid Game. And if, let's say, for example, we are able to get a remake, a one-time remake license from I think that was done by Netflix, and we could get it for Squid Game, and we put it onto our platform. Anybody anywhere else in the world, for example, in Spain, in Singapore, in China, who wants to do a version of the Squid Game in their own language, with their own stars, could come onto our Marvion platform to acquire that license. Right now, as all of us know, for us to actually get access to any kind of licenses with respect to anything, any media and entertainment intellectual property is actually extremely difficult. Very often you have to go through many middlemen paying a lot of intermediary fees before you can get access to it. What we hope to do is to actually disrupt the industry by making these licenses easily accessible and available. And that would really set us apart from the rest of the world as far as NFTs are concerned. And I want to reiterate again, we are not doing NFTs because it's a hype. We are not doing NFTs because it's an end product. We are doing NFTs because it's a tool to make our lives in the real world better, to make it more enhanced, and to create efficiencies. And that's the reason why we are able to face the SEC in the US, because we know exactly what we're doing. And I just wanted to re-emphasize that point, Martin. Thank you for the question.
What we'll do is we'll bring Malcolm in now, and as the Chief Compliance Officer. So, Malcolm, how do you see the regulatory landscape for the NFT changing, and how is Marvion preparing for it?
I think that came out quite well in terms of timing there. Okay, so I think what we go back 6 months, very few people were really talking very much about NFTs, and then all of a sudden this thing exploded, and with it we've seen this real drive around interest from regulators. So they start looking at it from various angles. For example, there's the illicit finance, the money laundering side of it, and whether that's passing through. And then we see whether prices are just being artificially inflated and so forth. Now, one of the things that's going to become very, very important is going to be to differentiate what an NFT is, because not all NFTs are the same. So the discussions that take place now is like, well, okay, we have this type of NFT, which might be for profile pictures, and we see a lot of those at the moment. We might see some tokens that represent gaming artifacts that you produce as you play your blockchain-based game. And then we see the classification of those things that relate to real world, or those things that relate to IP, which is what's happening here. So I think from a regulatory perspective, there's a big focus on those things where there is risk to a consumer, to the person who's purchasing, or there's a risk to financial value and transactions that are moving through the network, and the legitimacy of those funds. So when we start to look at scales risk, then we say, okay, what we're doing here is we're on that end where actually we have real world tangible value, whether it's intellectual property or physical assets, tied to an NFT that represents the digital ownership title. So in a sense, it's that digital certificate that really helps to bind with the physical part of what's happening, and really gives that value that maybe doesn't exist in certain other areas, or that, let's say, that regulators might be concerned. There are still aspects we have to look at. We can cover those a little bit later, particularly around the money flow. But certainly from a perspective of, do we need to what level do we need to be concerned? It's about ensuring that the IP rights are owned in the first place, and then that we have that we can attach this digital ownership title to those IP rights, or to that product or asset rather, in a way that then becomes legally binding, to put those two things together.
Thank you, Malcolm, for clarifying that question. So what is the standard AML KYC process that Marvion uses currently?
Yeah, sure. So we really like to talk about AML and KYC. Well, I do. So I'll educate other people. But okay, so AML, anti-money laundering, KYC is know your customer. If you go to any bank, you'll be doing this. It's with your passport or your ID card. It's your proof of address. If you go to a crypto exchange, then you might have to do a selfie on your phone and again, provide a proof of address or proof of your location. So these are sort of well-established processes that have existed and been matured across different platforms. And I've been fortunate enough to be in the position to build several of these solutions over the last few years. And then behind the scenes, you have monitoring, looking at, for example, if payment is in a token like a cryptocurrency, then making sure that it's come from legitimate sources, and those transaction flows that mean that we're comfortable with the funds that are being produced. So this is what we're now on that journey for Marvion, is to sort of build out this framework that even though you currently see these processes existing in firms that are regulated, that have licenses, for example, banks or crypto exchanges that are in jurisdictions where they need licenses. Here we're starting to say, okay, we recognize the risk. We are a US listed firm, and because of that, we're managing this risk as well by building out these same types of processes that you would see, but very importantly, doing it in a way that will be as frictionless as possible for anybody using the platform. And then on the other side, for where the rights are being acquired, it's the same process. So making sure that all of the due diligence is done behind the scenes, to assure both the buyer and the seller of the legitimacy and the accuracy of any transaction that takes place.
So when are NFTs considered securities?
Oh, you see, you guys are getting a full compliance briefing tonight.
Oh, we are. We like compliance. That's what keeps us regulated. So we like our compliance.
Super. I'd love to hear it. Okay, so when are NFTs considered securities? Generally, when we look at existing regulation around securities, it's there for a reason. It's there to protect consumers. It's there to protect the financial system. So these rules exist, but there's sort of good reason why they're there. Now, there's a couple of scenarios, not specifically related to Marvion, but just generally when you're looking at this kind of ecosystem of NFTs. The first one is the obvious one, which is fractionalization. So let's say, for example, you have a gemstone that's worth, I don't know, 10 million, and you want to offer it in $10 shares to be able to make up that value. So you offer like 1 million shares of $10 each, and there you've got the 10 million value. When you're doing that, that would be classed as something called a collective investment scheme, and that falls under existing securities legislation, or it may do. So in that case, that kind of project may require licensing, depending on where it's actually the security would then be issued, or the issuance of the tokens takes place, but also where it's then marketed. So those two aspects. The other way that it might happen is through where we might create a derivative of a number of NFTs. So we might say, okay, we have like 5, 6, 7 NFTs. We're going to bundle them together, and actually we're going to get some investors to invest into it. That might be treated as a fund. So you may see that as a fund as well. So a similar kind of concept of collective investment, except you're just pooling money in to buy a basket of NFTs rather than just one. So there's a couple of scenarios where it really does depend on the regulation in particular jurisdictions, but there might be examples of where NFTs can then be seen as securities.
Question. So Scotty asks, can you please explain the need for an authorized share count of 138 billion shares?
Sure. Thanks, Martin, for that for that question, and thank you, Scotty, for that question. This is the largest elephant in the room, and we definitely want to make sure we address it today. However, I'm actually just very mindful and very careful of the restrictions that have been imposed on me, and that's the reason why I originally wanted a dialogue, which would make it easier for me to answer that question. But that's fine. A dialogue is actually not possible in this case. So let me try and answer this question in the most sincere and most meaningful manner, without actually having to breach any of the regulations. Now, the answer to this question actually comes. There are two parts to it. The first part of the question I would answer in this manner. Look, if my friend actually owns a company, and he previously issued one share for $1, and he actually spent that $1 in that company over the last 3 years, and currently the company has nothing, absolutely zero in it, and he wants me to then inject my car, let's say for example, my Lamborghini that's worth $500,000 and if he wanted me to inject my Lamborghini into that company, if I were friendly, I would say, look, then you've got to issue 500,000 shares worth $1 each to me, because the value of my car or my Lamborghini is 500,000, right? That would result in a dilution for my friend at 500,000 times. But I'm still being friendly because I still value his one share at $1, even though technically speaking, the company has absolutely nothing. Okay, so he still owns over 500,001 shares in my Lamborghini, which I used to own 100% of. Right, so that's actually already still very, very friendly. So as to why we issue shares and dilute existing shareholders, the reason is because in any situation where you have an investment being made into the company, or where you actually make an acquisition of an asset that's of a certain value, you will need to issue a certain number of shares in order to compensate for the injection of the asset. So that's the first part of the question. Now, the second part of the question would be, so why is it 138 billion shares? Why not 100 billion? Why not 500 million? Why do we need to issue 138 billion shares? Now, if you look at the market cap of BONZ on a fully diluted basis today, okay, after all of the shares that were intended to be issued would have been issued, although that's not the case at the moment, but let's assume it is fully diluted, the market cap of BONZ would be $700 million US. Okay, now that may sound like a big number to most people. However, I would just like to direct everyone's attention to what's actually happening in the metaverse, in the blockchain, and in the NFT industry. Number one, Decentraland. I'm not sure how many people have heard of Decentraland, but Decentraland basically is in the business of a virtual universe. They're selling pieces of land to pieces of their virtual land to a lot of land collectors, virtual land collectors, so to speak. And right now, its tokens, the market cap of the tokens issued by Decentraland, which goes by the ticker MANA, M-A-N-A, is currently at $6.7 billion US. That's just about 10 times the value of the market cap of BONZ. Okay, and we are only talking about the tokens. None of the token holders own any equity in Decentraland. Just the tokens alone is worth 7 billion. And this is also not. This is also without actually considering the value of the land that they're selling, right? Because I think if you've gone through the news, you know that some of these pieces of land have gone for as high as 500,000 US dollars. And remember, Decentraland has an infinite amount of land that they can roll out, because in the virtual world, there is no limitation unless you actually contractually limit the number of pieces of land you can actually issue, right? So that's Decentraland. Another example, Sandbox, okay, which is another company that's also selling virtual land in their virtual universe. Their tokens, again, only the tokens with the ticker SAND, is currently with a market cap of 12.7 billion US dollars. This is almost 20 times the market cap of BONZ shares, which is our entire company, okay? And all we're talking about there is only the tokens, okay? And these are two companies that's in the business of a virtual universe, which I explained earlier, something that we will be doing in 2022 for Marvion. The third company for reference is OpenSea. This is a platform where a lot of NFTs are being traded, okay? And again, they are nothing like us, right? Because as far as OpenSea is concerned, they only care about the NFTs, the volume of the NFTs being traded on the platform. They do not care very much about curation. Anyone can submit any NFT onto their platform, right? And again, like I explained earlier, these NFTs that are actually being traded on OpenSea are not documents of title. They are not legally binding documents. And yet, the most recent fundraise by OpenSea has valued them at 13.3 billion US dollars. Again, that's almost 20 times the entire market cap of BONZ. Now, if we, Marvion, wants to come into this space, we need to make sure that we have sufficient market cap, we have sufficient value to be able to play in this space. And right now, if you ask me, even at a 700 million US dollar market cap, we are still too small. We need to grow much bigger. We need to make significant acquisitions to enable us to actually be successful in this industry. We are already ahead of everyone else because we decided to do what's right. And we believe that our business would be really, really amazing as we go, as the tide recedes and as all the hype goes away for blockchain and for crypto and for NFTs. People are going to realize that we are the only company that is serious about using blockchain and NFTs as a solution for real-world applications. And I want to really emphasize that our market cap at USD 700 million is nothing compared to what's out there. And I hope that answers the question. I'll pass it back to you, Martin.
Thank you, Julian. Fantastic explanation there. And you can just feel the passion. So we'll swiftly move this along to another related question to what you just mentioned. Now, some of the audience members might not be familiar with Bonz, so maybe just you can quickly explain who they are. But the question states from Norman Bundek: how will Bonz and Marvion be integrated, and when will this be completed?
Okay, so look, this is in reality a reverse merger. Okay, Bonz used to contain certain gold mining and other metal mining businesses. All of that are no longer there, right? So as I explained earlier, by the time Marvion was injected into BONZ or Bonz, it was already an empty shell with no other assets. The only asset that exists in this vehicle going forward will be Marvion. So there is no concept, or there's no sense of integration, because there's no need to integrate, because the only thing Bonz would have would be Marvion. Now, as far as when it'll be completed, I mean, it's not so much about completion. We have actually already filed the Form 14C to do two things. Number one, to change the name of the company to Marvion Inc. And number two, to change the ticker so that it will no longer be BONZ, and it will be a ticker that reflects the identity of Marvion. And we believe this will be done before the end of this month, which is February. I hope that helps and that answers the question. Thank you, Martin. Back to you.
No, you're welcome. Thank you, Julian. I think that explains the concept behind it. So I think that's good. I hope, Norman, that answers your question. If not, please feel free to write additional comments and I can pass them on to Julian. Thank you. So Julian, just moving on, can you comment on Marvion's business model and how does it generate revenue?
Right. So like I mentioned earlier, there will be our focus for 2022 will be in three buckets. The first one, as I mentioned, will be our Marvion universe. It will be our virtual universe, and like Decentraland and like Sandbox. What we'll really be doing is that we will be selling plots of land in our virtual universe. I don't want to try and I don't want to reveal too much here, because that's really our trade secret. But we are going to be able to differentiate ourselves from Decentraland and differentiate ourselves from Sandbox. People buying land in the Marvion universe are going to be very excited and are going to feel very satisfied about owning these virtual pieces of land, because they will be limited. They will not be unlimited. They will not be an infinite issuance or creation of new land. And that's what's going to make these pieces of land valuable. Again, like I said, just the sale of these pieces of land will generate huge revenues for Marvion. The second bucket will be the one I mentioned earlier, which is, whilst we are building a huge and significant portfolio of intellectual property in the media and entertainment space, we will be putting that up onto our platform for everyone to have access to and to acquire for their new productions. There are two ways we're going to make money here. One is obviously from the sale of intellectual property licenses that we have already acquired. For example, in the recent acquisition that was released, in the press release that we've made recently. And the second way would be, to the extent that we are not able to acquire those licenses and that we are merely providing a service, a technology, blockchain technology service to mint the NFTs for the license owners, we will be making our revenues in the form of a commission when we facilitate the sale of these licenses, these rights and licenses on our platform. And the third bucket is, I think, some of us or some of you in the audience who are already following me on LinkedIn or on Twitter, you would know that we are looking for specific projects that would fit into our belief and our vision for hybrid NFTs. And rather than trying to do these projects ourselves, we would rather find or hope to partner up with other entrepreneurs who are very strong in that particular area or in that particular industry where they feel that hybrid NFTs will add value and will enhance their product to work with us. And that's what we're looking to do with them as well. So those are the three buckets of businesses that will be rolling out in 2022. And each of those three buckets of businesses will bring revenues to Marvion. I hope that answers the question. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Julian. So we'll move that along. I mean, a little bit of an overlap here with Belinda Chan's question, but we'll ask it anyway. So, are you able to share your thoughts on the metaverse itself, and how different do you see it from some of the existing players? I mean, we have touched upon it slightly with OpenSea, etc. So, answer where you see fit.
No, so Martin, this is actually a fantastic question. Normally, it would take me an hour to answer it because it's actually quite complex. So Belinda, thank you for that question. Now, everyone talks about the metaverse as if it was only the virtual universe, right? At Marvion, that's not how we look at it, okay? At Marvion, the virtual universe is the virtual universe. The metaverse for us is effectively a multiverse that involves three concepts. Okay, so there is firstly the real versus the virtual world. So as far as Marvion is concerned, our metaverse will comprise of both the real and the virtual world. The second concept is tangible assets versus intangible assets, right? Now, tangible assets obviously only exist in the real world because you can touch and feel it. However, contrary to what most people believe, intangible assets do not only exist in the virtual world, they also exist in the real world. And intangible assets in the real world take the form of intellectual property, licenses, and contractual rights. Now, most people think that as long as their assets are in the virtual world, they do not have to care about what's happening in the real world, and that's not the case, right? Because every single intangible asset in the virtual world will have a mirror image or a shadow in the real world, because every single one of those assets are effectively contractual rights in the real world. So as far as our metaverse is concerned, it will have both tangible and intangible assets in both the real world and the virtual world. And the third concept we have to get ourselves wrap our heads around is Web 2.0 and Web 3.0. Now, again, a lot of people assume that the metaverse is living only in Web 3.0. That's, again, not the case, right? For example, we've heard about how Paris Hilton has a house in Roblox, okay? That is a virtual world. However, it sits in Web 2.0, okay? On the other hand, people who buy land in Decentraland, that platform is on a Web 3.0. So that's actually a virtual asset in a Web 3.0. So as far as we are concerned, the metaverse is a combination of all of these 6 items. That's what metaverse is to us at Marvion. So I just want to again emphasize, we at Marvion, our biggest strength is our clarity on what we're doing, our clarity on what exactly we are selling, our clarity on what exactly we are, or how we are engaging our audience and our community. And the reason why we have the courage to actually put ourselves within the SEC scrutiny is because we know exactly what we're doing. And I hope that actually provides confidence, and I hope that actually explains the question that Belinda Chan has. Thank you very much, Belinda, for that question. I'll hand it back over to Martin.
Yeah, I believe it should answer the question. And just to acknowledge also, Tony Chan asked a very similar question. So, Tony, I hope that also answers your question. Good to see you, Tony. Hopefully, if not, then please do write another comment and we can move that along there for you, Tony. So we'll move it quickly over to Malcolm. So Malcolm, going to be using any banking services?
Hi, thank you. So I think with any firm, banking is important, and it goes without saying that, you know, as a firm, then it's going to be important to maintain that. Part of this is looking at how we structure those things, and really this goes back to the conversation we were having about making sure we're doing the right things, making sure we're putting in place the right due diligence, both on customers but also on those items that we're selling. So from a banking perspective, what's expected in this industry is very much around making sure that we've got those building blocks in place, and that then helps us to secure the network of accounts and so forth that we then need, both for operation but also for client purposes as well.
Dear Mr. Wright, do you plan on using the tokenization of shares in the future?
So I think from a Marvion perspective, I don't think that's, I'll allow Julian to comment on that. I think generally speaking, we already see tokenization of shares in the form of security tokens, and there are exchanges that are already starting to look at this and how you tokenize shares. Again, we're back into the world of securities there once we start doing this. So I would say that yes, there are going to be platforms that are doing this already. We've seen this for a couple of years, but the uptake may be depending on both regulation, because certain jurisdictions may allow it or not allow it, through to the desire of people to actually then be able to, the purchasers to want to buy tokenized version of shares rather than, for example, the existing mechanisms of buying shares.
Malcolm. Okay, next question will be for Julian. So what is the difference between Marvion and Coinlectibles, and what's your role in them? I mean, we've heard a lot about Coinlectibles recently, so where does this all fit?
Right. So again, thank you for that question, Martin. Look, the reason why I came in my capacity as Group CEO is obviously to show everyone that we are an entire ecosystem. And that's the reason why we will, I believe we will succeed. So Marvion is actually in the business of media and entertainment. So anything that has to do with media entertainment, including comic books, movies, drama series, music, all of that comes under Marvion. It does not really matter what kind of NFTs we use, whether it's a fusion NFT or hybrid NFT. As far as we're concerned, our NFTs will always be digital ownership titles of certain assets, whether tangible or intangible. Okay. Now, what Coinlectibles does is that it's actually in the arts and collectibles industry, which because sometimes certain types of collectibles in the media and entertainment industry could also end up becoming but both of these companies are within our group. From a shareholder perspective, we are not putting all of our companies directly under a holding company. That's a choice. That's a conscious choice that we've made. We prefer all of our listed companies treated separately, to function separately, a certain level of independence, so that any transactions between them, number one, will be transparent, and every transaction will be accountable, and it will be on arm's length, right? So unlike within a group where they have the same holding company, you could have a situation where you're doing transfer pricing. We will not do any of that. So, for example, currently Marvion holds the trademark for hybrid NFTs, and Coinlectibles holds the trademark for fusion NFTs. And if they were to use the trademarks of the other company, they would actually negotiate a commercial price for that again on an outside basis. That's how we prefer to run all of these within our group, and we think that that's the best way to actually run them. But obviously, everyone has got a different way and a different view about how their group companies should be managed, but that's the way we manage our companies. I hope that's helpful. Thanks, Martin.
Thank you, Julian. So we'll move that on into a bit of an artist direction now. We've had a question from Buck38018. So hello, Julian and Malcolm. How will Marvion capitalize on a new artist development and protecting their ownership? That's the first question. And will Marvion provide this service without engaging in intellectual company ownership? We'll go through afterwards.
First of all, I'm trying to, Martin, I apologize to Buck. I am not entirely wrapping my head around those questions. Look, first of all, I want to reiterate again, Marvion is in the media and entertainment industry. So when we talk about artist development, perhaps Buck could try to rephrase that question so I can answer it. But with respect to the second question, I assume you're talking about intellectual property ownership rather than intellectual company ownership. Now, as far as we're concerned, we are trying to build the Meta Studio so that it will be in a position to help a lot of people mint hybrid NFTs for their businesses. However, it will be absolutely necessary for us, from our perspective, because these are our standards, that if you were going to mint an NFT for a digital media file, which is an intangible asset, it must come with some kind of intellectual property rights or licenses. We need to make clear what exactly are we selling to the NFT buyer when he actually takes ownership of the NFT. We cannot do something on the basis that there is no intellectual property rights precisely described in the NFT. I hope that answers the question. Thanks, Martin.
Yeah, thank you, Julian. So Buck did go on to ask another question, and it may actually help us to decipher what the first question was. So, he's asked here on this one, how will Marvion work with a new artist to develop NFTs? That might be able to help answer the first part of the question. And then obviously, what are the minting prices for the digital NFTs through Marvion? I mean, they're variable, so I don't know how much of that you could answer.
Yeah, so as far as the first question is concerned, again, I assume when artists is being mentioned, we're talking about producers of media files. Again, like I mentioned earlier, if that particular asset was really an artwork, it should really belong to Coinlectibles rather than Marvion. But for the purposes of this question, I'm going to assume that artists, by artists you mean producers. I assume the artwork or the end product is really perhaps like a short film, or it's a comic book, so that it falls into the media and entertainment industry. Now, Marvion would be very, very keen to work with anyone like this. This actually falls into the third bucket of our business strategy that I mentioned earlier. We want anyone and everyone who has any idea about trying to create a community around the production or the end product that he's actually creating to come to us, pitch us the idea, because we will use our technology, we will use our legal expertise, and we will use our financial expertise to help you build your community and to build your product and your business. That's what we really hope to do. As for the second question about minting prices, we at Marvion are actually blockchain agnostic. So from our perspective, we're happy to use any blockchain. And right now, obviously, I mean, we all know that, for example, Polygon and Tezos and Solana are among the cheapest blockchains to use for the purposes of minting NFTs. We are very happy to use them. We don't necessarily always have to use Ethereum, which is extremely expensive. And if the project makes sense to Marvion, we are willing to go as far as to absorb all gas fees, get the project up and running, because we feel that these producers are actually our partners. And if we see value in the community and the business that is going to come from what this particular producer is going to do, we'll be quite happy to make these small investments into our partnerships. I hope that answers the question. Thanks, Martin.
Thank you, Julian. Yeah, I'm sure it does. Buck, if that doesn't answer your very first question that you asked, please do pop a new comment in so we could answer. Thank you. Julian, could you tell us, so what does make Marvion a good investment, and why should investors invest?
Right. So this is the one question that actually would fall within the restrictions that are imposed on us. I mean, first of all, we are not here to provide any kind of financial advice, and I really do not want to make any forecast or any forward-looking statements here. But I just want to remind you what the facts are. Okay, Marvion, which is under Bonz at the moment, has a market cap of just $700 million. The Decentraland's token, not the company, not its assets, just its token, has a market cap of $6.7 billion, which is about 10 times of Marvion's market cap. Sandbox token has a market cap of $12.7 billion, almost 20 times the market cap of Marvion. And thirdly, OpenSea has, this one is shares, these are not tokens. OpenSea, as a private company whose shares are not publicly listed, and I can assure you they're going to have so much difficulty trying to get listed because of the experience we've had with SEC, right? Currently has a market cap or valuation of $13.3 billion, again 20 times the market cap of Marvion. So you have to seek independent advice, try and understand what I've just said, and tell me what you think, whether you think Marvion is actually a good investment. I hope that answers the question. Thanks, Martin.
Very diplomatic. So got another bit of a forward-looking statement here, but from a Ray Tan. Given the chance, would Marvion want to move on to Nasdaq, as it is where most tech companies want to go, or does staying on the OTC market make more sense for the company?
Right. So from our perspective, and again, this is not a forward-looking statement, this is my view as the group CEO and as vice chair. Now, there are really only two considerations for us whether or not we move to Nasdaq, right? Number one is whether it increases our liquidity significantly. And number two, whether it would make our company available for investment to certain funds or institutional investors that can only make investments into Nasdaq companies rather than OTC companies. Now, if we are very happily in a position to get the investments that we want, and we have a very, very healthy trade for us to move to Nasdaq. But this is me explaining the considerations that we have about moving on to Nasdaq, and ultimately that decision will be made by the CEO of Marvion and the management team that supports him. But to me, in my view, those are the two considerations that I would have before I provide or I give any advice to the senior management team at Marvion. I hope that answers the question, Martin. Thank you. Thanks, Ray, for the question.
Thank you very much, Julian. Okay, so next we'll take another question from the audience. Let's just flash one up, just a second. So this is a follow-on from Buck. So Marvion won't be like OpenSea, which it won't.
Right. So I mentioned earlier why OpenSea is going to have a lot of difficulty, getting themselves listed, right? Number one, the fact that they are using NFTs as an end product and really not as a tool, because Marvion is different. We are telling the SEC that we are really selling intangible assets. The only reason why they're in the form of NFTs is because it's a tool to enhance the product itself, right? Whereas on the OpenSea platform, you are really, number one, selling the NFT as an end product, right? Because it's going to be very challenging for them to articulate what exactly are they selling apart from the NFT. The second problem that OpenSea has would be that they are functioning more like an exchange, right? Where people can trade directly. And if you were to operate an exchange of crypto assets, in almost every jurisdiction that I know, you actually need to be properly licensed and properly regulated before you can run such an exchange. So the reason why Marvion Meta Studio is different is because we run a consignment model. So we don't run an exchange. People do not actually trade on our platform as if it's an exchange. Ultimately, we are the people responsible for receiving any payments and making that payment back to whoever has placed the NFTs on our platform for sale on a consignment basis. So that's how we're different from OpenSea. We will never be identical, because if we were, we will definitely be having massive difficulties having a conversation with the SEC today. I hope that answers the question. Thank you, Buck, for that question. Back to you, Martin.
Thank you, Buck. Okay, I hope that answers everyone's questions. We've got time for just one more question. We are out of time. We've gone past an hour now, so we will be having more AMAs like this. So we'll just have the last question, and then I think we've had to say that we've got a lot from that, and we'll start to call it a night. So just have that last question. So this is from Badley Beck. So some of this may be able to be answered also from Malcolm's side. So Bradley wants us to expand the underlying value of what of a hybrid NFT, and she says her current understanding is obviously that the NFTs, you don't really know if you own anything. However, with a hybrid NFT, it means that there is a legal backing. So maybe we can just dissect that into, say, three split questions. Malcolm can also probably go into the legal side of that hybrid NFT.
Yeah, okay. So as I was trying to explain a bit earlier, if Bradley, thank you for this question. If you have ever gone into OpenSea or any of the other NFT marketplaces, Rarible or Super Rare, and if you try to mint your NFT, you're going to discover that you can only have 3 fields, right? The name, the description, and the link to, I assume that you will be posting an image, to your JPEG image. Now, when your NFT only contains these 3 information, there is no way that the NFT can represent any kind of legal rights or any kind of legal license. Now, the way our hybrid NFT is different is that every single document that is necessary to describe the rights and the licenses that are owned by the NFT holder are actually minted into the NFT and uploaded onto the blockchain so that it is immutable. And that's why the hybrid NFT is different. In fact, I think it's come to light if you had a chance to look at some of the articles. Some of these links aren't even linked to the blockchain, not linked to Filecoin, for example, or IPFS or Arweave. They're actually linked to a centralized server. So imagine most NFT is like a piece of paper. It has a never repeating serial number, so it's unique, but it only allows you to write 3 things. And if the only 3 things you write is name, description, and link, and it's a link to a centralized server where it can be broken at any time, then what do you actually own when you buy an NFT? And that is the problem. That is the problem with people treating the NFT as an end product, because it is not. You need to make sure that the NFT is actually a document, a title document, legally binding, where you can take your NFT, go to the police and report loss if you ever lost something, go to an enforcer and enforce in favor of your intellectual property rights if someone is in breach of it, or go to court and sue someone who has either stolen your item or has actually acted in a manner that breaches your rights to that particular item or to that particular asset. And that's what the hybrid NFT does. Very, very different from anything else you have seen. With that, I'll pass on to Malcolm if he's got anything else to add. Thank you.
No, I think it kind of wraps out well, Julian. I think the only other thing that maybe is worth mentioning there is it's just that there's this legal binding. So you, unlike, for example, where you might see a standard NFT around something where it's really just the smart contract that looks around the payment mechanisms, the settlement of how you pay for an NFT and the image itself. Here we have a lot more legal documents that are linked immutably between the asset and the title of ownership and all of those documents that are set with it in this immutable contract. So there's a lot more information that binds the two together. There's a lot more around what you might consider a more traditional legal contract or agreements, rather than just a simple smart contract for delivery.
Thank you, Malcolm. Thank you, Julian. So we've come to the end of the AMA session. Any last comments from either of you before we close out the room?
Yeah, let me close out by saying that this AMA is going to be the first of many. We feel responsible to our shareholders who are part of our community to actually constantly provide information to the best of our abilities to do so within the regulatory environment. And we feel that this is actually going to be very useful for everyone. So rest assured that if some of your questions have not been answered, we may be back on again within a fortnight to start answering even more questions. So that was the only assurance I wanted to give. I want to thank everyone for being present, the organizers as well as the audience. We feel very encouraged by the attention and by the care that we are getting from all of you. Thanks, Martin.
Thank you very much. Malcolm, thank you very much as well for joining. And
thank you.
No, you're welcome. And to the entire team, I know it's very late for everyone here in Asia, so thank you. And that's a wrap from the first Marvion AMA session. And thank you all for your patience and going forth with us on this AMA session this evening. So thank you, Julian. Thank you, Malcolm. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.